Well, hello, everyone. My name is Meredith, and along with Michelle, Jalen, and Gerard, we want to welcome you to our prevention workshop for the treatment of addictive disorders class with our professor, Dr. Horn. We welcome you to our presentation. The title of our presentation that we have for you today is Breaking the Cycle, Preventing Drug Misuse in Youth and Emerging Adults.
Hi, everyone. So, for our program, we decided to title it with the acronym HYPE, which stands for Helping Youth Through Prevention and Education, a holistic approach to helping youth and their families with education and community support.
HYPE is a community-based program designed to educate and prevent drug misuse among young people in our community by equipping them with the knowledge, skills, and support systems needed to make informed, healthy choices and promote resilience. HYPE provides evidence-based drug education in the community and schools. Using a holistic approach, our program uses discussions led by dedicated staff, peers, and to raise awareness about the harm of drug misuse and the impact it may have on their mental, emotional, physical, and social well-being, as well as the impact it has on their future. Additionally, our program is designed to prevent drug misuse through interventions that foster protective behaviors and reduce risk factors among youth in our community. Here, we would like to list some learning objectives that we would like to discuss. First, describe the risk factors associated with narcotic use among young people. Second, explain the impact of systematic racism and oppression on narcotic use in different communities. And third, analyze the role of stigma in preventing individuals from seeking help for substance use issues.
Right, and then fourth, we have, describe current interventions used for the prevention of drug use and use of various population and context. And five, identify the role of adverse childhood experiences as a predictive factor for substance abuse in youth.
So, these are our pre-program assessment questions. Something to be thinking about just before we present. Do you recall participating in a drug prevention program in your youth? What did you think of that experience? And if you were to look back on said program, do you feel it was effective or relevant to your life and culture?
So, our introduction and rationale to how we came up with this program. Collectively, we feel like our collective experiences and our exposure to drug abuse and drug related problems, whether it was in our youth or in our families, really informs our passion to affect positive change and support for the youth in our communities. It's really why we're here in this program. Academically, the research supports the focus on this issue. Substance use during adolescence is particularly dangerous. This is a really impactful phase of development for youth. And with the rise of death due to overdose, this is becoming increasingly a problem for young people with still developing bodies. Earlier experimentation with drugs is predictive of developing a substance use disorder later in adulthood. So that's the younger a child starts experimenting, the higher the risk and the more predictive it is of developing problems later on. And so delaying regular drug use, we know, increases positive outcomes, such as access to higher education. The longer we can get people to wait to experiment or to try drugs, the better set up they are for having the resiliency and the skills they need to become self-sufficient. And we also have seen in the research that this generation of youth, Gen Z, is drinking less alcohol, but they are more interested in other types of psychoactive drugs. And so that's a concerning trend. And then why should you care about this problem? Well, the social significance is really immense. There is a high social, economic, and other types of strains on all of society when children, youth, and emerging adults fall into addictive patterns. This can be a strain on the housing system, on our healthcare system, and other things as populations of youth are unable to become self-supporting. while also adding a burden and an increased demand on public services for support. And so basically, as counselors in training, this is just a really important demographic and population and an issue for all of us to become better informed by.
So, as my colleague mentioned earlier, I go by the name of Gerard Christmas. I am a U.S. Army veteran, a second year clinical mental health counseling graduate student here at North Carolina Central University. So, my personal interest in this topic is that I believe bad habits start very young. I was personally introduced to alcohol at a young age. At the same time, my peers was introduced to illegal drugs. Later, those drugs became an addiction and derailed their life, and I was there to witness it. I'm aware that youth of today's society are partaking in these same bad behaviors, but with more potent substances. So the idea of a drug prevention program targeting youth, it seemed very fitting for me.
Hi, everyone. As also my colleague introduced myself, my name is Michelle Martells. I'm also a second year in the mental health counseling program here at Central. So I'm interested in this topic for my personal ties that are a little or personal tie adjacent. A few of my friends' parents are in AA and NA, and I've seen, they've told me about their upbringings and stuff like that. And I think prevention programs starting earlier is a great way to minimize individuals ending up in situations that are incredibly challenging to get out of. Um, my mother has also been the director of a daycare my whole life, so I've spent a lot of time around children, and I've grown up hearing what substance abuse of any kind can do to an individual and those around them and in the home, and it's not super pretty. So I felt like a drug prevention youth program also seemed fitting.
Hello, once again, my name is Meredith Morse. I am a retired Navy wife and a mother of four boys who age and range from 15 to 22. This is my third year in the clinical mental health graduate program at Central, and with a concentration in addictions counseling. I do plan on a career in crisis intervention and working with trauma and addictions counseling. My personal interest in this particular topics extends definitely from being a mother of 14 and young adult boys. Given the ages that they're at, I have a front row seat to the challenges of growing up in a world that is increasingly influenced by drug culture, and also watching illicit drugs becoming ever more dangerous and ever more available. And I myself am a child of a dysfunctional home. Growing up, things were pretty rough. My adverse childhood experience score, if you're familiar with that scale, is a 7. And so I've just remained motivated to live my life as the kind of adult that I wish I had when I was a child. And so just wanting to be able to provide the kind of support that I would have appreciated having growing up to others. And then I also just want to share briefly during one of my local visits to Narcotics Anonymous meeting, I had this really profound moment of meeting a young man who was only 17 years old, and he was at the meeting it was his very first meeting, and it was the same group that his father was also attending. And so it was just this really profound moment of father and son having the same need for community and addiction support. And so it just really underscored for me the generational impact of substance abuse.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jalen Weaver. I am a third year clinical mental health student here at Central. This topic interests me because I also have a passion for serving those in their early years, childhood through adulthood, early adulthood. And I found that this is the time that those individuals tend to experiment more, especially if they've been through traumatic experiences, which I tend to navigate more towards as well. So I felt like this program would be beneficial to help reduce the number of individuals that reach for substances, as well as provide a review and refresher for myself and my colleagues.
So we want to just highlight the nature of the problem with some statistics. Half of all teens have misused a drug at least once. This is 46% of teens have tried illicit drugs by the time they are in 12th grade. And 11% of overdose deaths are youth aged 15 to 24. Between 1/3 and 1/2 of youth involved in the legal system meet the criteria for a substance use disorder. And this statistics was interesting. Of the 1.8 million youth, okay, so age 12 to 17, who had a substance use disorder and did not receive treatment, studies show that a huge majority of them did not seek treatment or think they should get it. So they didn't even think that they had a need for it. Only about less than 1% of youth with a substance use disorder actually sought treatment, and 2% did not seek any treatment, but they thought they should get it. And so I think it highlights this statistic really underscores the disconnect between teen drug use behavior and the bridge to seeking treatment. And then close to 9 million people in 2022 in the age group 12 or older misused opioids, which were either heroin or prescription pain relievers. And the large majority of this group abused prescription pain relievers. And so whether or not drugs are coming to children through the market or through their doctors, there seems to be a correlation between prescription pain relievers and access and the ways in which it gives children access to opioids.
So continuing on with more statistics, between the years 2016 and 2020, drug use among 8th graders went up 61%, which, you know, the common age in 8th grade is 13 years to 14 years old. 2.08 million 12 to 17-year-olds reported using drugs in the last month, as well as a little under 600,000 teenagers in that same age group used illicit drugs other than marijuana in the last month, meaning harder drugs. And then this age group also is nearly twice as likely to suffer from illicit drug use disorder than meet the criteria for alcohol use disorder. As well as 8.14% of the same age group reported using drugs in the last month. 2.63 report misuse of pain relievers. 3.13 of all 12 to 17-year-olds met the criteria in the last year for illicit drug use disorder. And in North Carolina, teenagers are almost 2.5% less likely to have used drugs in the last month compared to the average American teen, which
I know you've been asked, what does these previous stats mean? So let's talk about it. So the problem is the use of illegal substances has become increasingly prevalent among youth and young adults. Illegal substances in youth and young adults present many short-term and long-term issues, such as health risks, long-term mental health issues, socioeconomic factors, social consequences, and impaired judgment that may lead to legal consequences in the future.
So there are a few different ways that we can analyze the problem. Substance use among youth is a complex issue that is shaped by biological, psychological, social, and systematic factors. Over time, the opioid and substance crisis and the rise of potent synthetic drugs like fentanyl have escalated these risks. Looking at it from a systematic inequalities and racism standpoint, communities of color face greater challenges due to systematic racism, as they are often criminalized rather than supported in addiction treatment. This results in mistrust and fewer resources for prevention and recovery. As far as the government influence, policies like the war on drugs have historically penalized addiction, especially in marginalized communities. Though recent policies emphasize treatment over punishment, resource inequalities still remain. From a cultural and family standpoint, cultural values and family attitudes can discourage drug use, but may also create stigma around seeking help. Family beliefs, socioeconomic status, and social pressures shape young people's attitudes towards narcotics. Adverse childhood experiences, such as a parent who abuses drugs in the home, are predictive factors for youth experimenting with drugs. Stigma and impact on society. Stigma around addiction prevents many individuals from seeking help. This issue impacts individual health, family stability, and community resources. Effective prevention must address systematic barriers, reduce stigma, and promote accessible support systems.
So let's talk about solutions. The biopsychosocial spiritual model highlights the importance of understanding the biological, psychological, social, and spiritual aspects of an individual's life in relation to substance use. This integrated approach promotes a comprehensive response to narcotics use that extends beyond mere treatment, addressing prevention, early intervention, and rehabilitation at multiple levels. From a social ecological standpoint, it's imperative to look at all layers of influence within the different systems. For the microsystem, that's referring to an individual's immediate environment, family, peers, and schools. Youth and emerging adults are incredibly influenced by these relationships, supportive family environment, peer pressure, things of that nature. The mesosystem is relating to the interaction between different microsystems. So this would be family to school, family to peer group. If there's a disconnection between family and school, for instance, it increases the likelihood of risky behaviors, ergo drug use. The exosystem is referring to a parent's workplace may have influence on preventing a child to use drugs. Time spent with children is beneficial to their development, as we all know. Parents working too often may take away this valuable time. Parents should be leaning more towards quantitative as well as qualitative time with their child. So that's really talking about the parental aspect. And then the macro system talks about public health policies available at the community level can support and upgrade healthcare, education, and social nets to enable full participation of all community members. Legal age requirements for the use of alcohol and cannabis, as well as stricter prescription opioid prescribing regulations. Things of that nature. And then the chrono system is referring to an individual or the role of time, the historical context in which individuals live. So it changes over time, such as the opioid epidemic that we are all familiar with. The legalization of marijuana in some areas across America can influence attitudes towards drug use and the accessibility of narcotics, typically for youth. So continuing on with solutions, the biopsychosocial spiritual approach is a comprehensive way of understanding how narcotic use impacts individuals. This model stresses that drug use cannot be understood solely through biological, psychological, social, or spiritual lenses independently, but rather as a result of interactions between all these factors, really emphasizing that it's a comprehensive situation. The biological aspect of substance use is crucial because it considers genetic predispositions, brain chemistry, and neurobiology. Emerging research shows that youth and emerging adults may be more vulnerable to addiction due to brain development. For instance, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision making and impulse control, is not fully developed until the mid-20s. The use of narcotics at an early age can interfere with normal brain development, making youth more susceptible to addiction and other mental health disorders later in life. The psychological factors include the role of mental health, trauma, stress, and coping mechanisms. Youth and emerging adults may turn to drugs as a way to self-medicate underlying issues such as depression, anxiety, trauma. The list goes on. Adolescents in particular may have poor coping skills and emotional regulation, which increases the likelihood of substance use as a coping mechanism. Psychological resilience and the development of healthy coping strategies are key components of prevention. Social factors encompass family dynamics, peer influence, community environment, and socioeconomic status. Peer pressure, family dysfunction, social isolation, and poverty are all risk factors for lacking mental health services. Recreational activities or after-school programs are more vulnerable to high rates of drug use. A supportive social environment, such as having a close-knit, understanding family or strong social network, can act as a protective factor. Spirituality can offer individuals a sense of meaning, purpose, and connection to something greater than themselves. For many, spirituality is an important protective factor against addiction. It can provide a framework for understanding the consequences of drug use and offer a sense of belonging and community that reduces feelings of isolation. Additionally, spiritual practices may promote emotional well-being, resilience, and the ability to deal with life's challenges in a healthier way. Solutions. So let's talk about impact. There are two typical kinds of impact in this regard, historically and the current one. The use of narcotics among youth and emerging adults has fluctuated over time, often influenced by societal attitudes, economic conditions, and drug availability. For instance, during the 1960s and 1970s, drug use was highly visible among youth, particularly in the form of cannabis, psychedelics, and later cocaine. In more recent decades, the opioid epidemic has brought about new challenges with prescription painkillers and heroin disproportionately affecting emerging adults. Historically, drug use was often criminalized and stigmatized with limited access to treatment and prevention. This led to punitive measures rather than a focus on rehabilitation or prevention. The contemporary landscape of narcotics use among youth and emerging adults is shaped by the opioid crisis, the spread of synthetic drugs like fentanyl, and shifting attitudes toward marijuana use. Drug use today is not only a health issue, but also a social and economic one. Families often experience trauma, financial hardship, and breakdowns in communication due to the impact of narcotics use. Communities may see increased rates of crime, unemployment, violence, while healthcare systems face increased pressure due to the cost of addiction treatment and emergency care. The societal impact is also felt through the criminal justice system where youth and emerging adults, particularly from marginalized communities, are disproportionately incarcerated for drug-related offenses. Prevention strategies. A comprehensive solution to preventing narcotics use among youth and emerging adults must be multifaceted, addressing the ecological and biopsychosocial spiritual factors at play. Some key strategies include education and awareness being the number one. Programs aimed at raising awareness about the dangers of narcotics and the impact of substance use on brain development are essential. Schools and community organizations should integrate drug education into their curriculum, focusing not only on the risk, but also on how to make healthy decisions. Family-based interventions, meaning supporting families through parenting programs, communication skills, training, and family therapy can help create protective environments that deter drug use. Family support programs can also be a critical part of treatment for those already affected by addiction. Community support programs, meaning communities can reduce the risk of narcotics use by providing youth with safe, engaging activities, mentorship, and access to mental health services. Community-based prevention efforts should focus on providing positive role models, accessible counseling, recreational outlets, and strong social networks to reduce isolation. Access to mental health services. Addressing underlying mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, or trauma is essential for preventing narcotics use. Early identification of mental health struggles and the provision of adequate mental health resources can help youth and emerging adults develop healthier coping mechanisms. Spiritual and resilience programs. Offering programs that promote spiritual growth, resilience, and emotional regulation can be particularly beneficial. This can include mentorship, group counseling, and participation in faith-based or other supportive communities that offer a sense of purpose and belonging. Policy and advocacy. Advocating for policy reforms that focus on harm reduction, access to treatment, and decriminalization of drug use, and increased funding for mental health services is necessary to create a more supportive environment for youth and emerging adults. Now, I know I just threw a lot of prevention strategies at you guys, which are all great. However, some do have, all of them have limitations. The prevention strategies we just discussed, while comprehensive and multifaceted, also face several limitations and challenges in their said implementation and effectiveness. Below are some key limitations for each. The first one being intersectional barriers. Many of the individuals at the highest risk of narcotic use face overlapping challenges such as poverty, trauma, discrimination, and lack of access to basic services. No single prevention strategy can fully address these overlapping issues without comprehensive multi-sectoral support. These efforts may fall short. One of them being, which the most overarching one, limited resources for families. Many families, particularly those in disadvantaged communities, may lack access to the resources necessary to engage in family-based interventions, such as therapy, counseling, or parenting classes. Many communities, especially in rural or underfunded urban areas, may lack the necessary infrastructure to offer robust youth engagement programs, mentorship, or mental health services. This also plays a role in support systems and the capacity to provide a supportive environment when things such as domestic violence and substance abuse are occurring in the home. The limitations for these resources also extend to a financial responsibility, the stigma around mental health as a whole, and more. Long-term commitment. Prevention strategies that we've been discussing often require sustained long-term investment to achieve meaningful change, which can be difficult to maintain due to shifting political priorities or limited funding. Evaluating success. Measuring the success of these strategies is inherently difficult. Long-term outcomes, such as the prevention of narcotics use, are hard to measure, and interventions may take years to show results. Additionally, success can be influenced by factors outside the direct control of the intervention, such as broader social and economic conditions. We also have to discuss the complexity of drug policy. Addressing narcotics use through policy reform is complex and requires balancing harm reduction with concerns about public safety, law enforcement, and the broader social implications of drug use. Navigating these complexities can slow down or hinder meaningful change. In summary, while these strategies provide a strong foundation for preventing narcotics use, they are not without limitations. The effectiveness of any approach depends on a combination of factors, including the targeted population's unique needs, resource availability, cultural context, and the broader socioeconomic environment. Oh, next slide, please.
Okay, so Michelle and Jalen did a great job identifying the problem and then discussing what are involved in the biopsychosocial needs for evaluating solutions. And so we wanted to share with you some examples of modern day programs that are attempting to do just that, to create a comprehensive, holistic approach, utilizing all those factors to engage with prevention strategies for youth. And so the first one that I want to share with you was developed by the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, and they call it Teens Linked to Care, or TLC. So this program, the TLC program, was designed to develop, assess, and implement prevention strategies for addressing substance use and sexual risk among youth in high-risk rural communities. The CDC really focused on keeping the TLC program easy to use and easy to access, to just kind of help with that broad implementation. So the TLC is essentially a framework that can be easily adapted and used primarily in schools. Right from the CDC website, they offer toolkits that can be downloaded to provide schools with instructions on developing their own program. Their own assessments have shown that this program is trending to be effective. Of students screened during the pilot program for risky substance use, 27% of them received brief intervention from a healthcare provider while in the program, and another 25% were referred to substance abuse treatment. If you recall, earlier in the presentation, we talked about the lack of that disconnect between teen substance use and abuse and their access to treatment. And so this program has definitely made strides in bridging that gap. And so overall, there is a decreased substance use in teens at TLC sites and schools that use it compared to non-TLC sites. The limitation with this particular program is that this program was piloted and studied and focused primarily in rural areas. And I think that it could potentially be adapted to a broader population of schools in different settings, but of course, more funding would be necessary to make that happen. A second intervention that I found exceptionally compelling is one called a Housing Opportunities, Motivation, and Engagement, or HOME. This intervention is targeted for a population of youth involved with the legal system. And also, if you recall from the statistics earlier, almost half of this population, once youth are involved with the justice system, almost half are predicted to develop a substance use disorder. And so meeting the needs of youth that are institutionalized in some capacity is exceptionally important for addressing drug use in this population. So HOME's objective is to determine whether a supportive housing intervention can prevent opioid initiation and opioid use disorder in youth experiencing homelessness. Homelessness and incarceration are highly correlated. This program builds on the principles of harm reduction, using housing first method that provides direct access to shelter without the prerequisites of sobriety or a clean legal record. Included in this intervention essentially targets direct support for rent and utilities through vouchers. There are also trained facilitators and counselors offering motivational interviewing and other types of education such as HIV, sexually transmitted diseases. And it engages with strengths-based advocacy to really help empower youth as they navigate this institutionalization. The pilot study reports that participants were highly engaged in the support services. They remained almost completely housed, and they showed short-term improvements in cognitive functioning and drug-related consequences. Key challenge of this study was documented that once you start helping people with their rent, landlords will raise their rent. So this remains a constant problem for interventions such as these. The study was also limited to the population of previously incarcerated youth. It would be interesting to see what something like this on a wider scale, or maybe extending out to families, might entail. But we're just going to still deal with the supply and demand. That once you provide rent assistance, landlords just keep raising their rent. And third, a third intervention that I wanted to highlight that fits with what Michelle was explaining about all the interventions in those exosystems that revolve around youth is the importance of family-based prevention. And so there's a program called Creating Lasting Family Connections, or CLFC. And this comes from comes out of the idea that interventions that focus on both parenting skills and family bonding appear to be the most effective in reducing or preventing substance abuse in youth. And so this intervention is a targeted intervention at youth and their families that are deemed or to be in high-risk environments. So while it's a targeted intervention for a specific population, it actually has benefits from broad implementation. The CLFC can be used in churches, schools, community centers, and easily adaptable to different environments. This program essentially offers trained facilitators provide weekly parent and youth training sessions over 20 weeks. And in that time, they may also provide referrals as necessary to other community resources if those facilitators find that they're dealing with something that requires referral. It's been proven effective. It reduces youth engagement with substance use and increases parental awarenesses of the services that are available to them, as well as just the knowledge, like parenting is hard. And so it gives some parenting support, and it helps increase their awareness and their beliefs about substance use. The limitations of this program, it's based on a recruitment of a select targeted group for participation. And so recruitment for participants can be tricky, and then also more study is needed to determine the long-term efficacy of such a program, but it is promising. And so we want to present to you our program based on all of what we've presented so far. We envision a program called HYPE. As we stated before, this is helping youth through prevention and education. So based on all the research and the types of effective interventions we have already explored, we know that effective prevention programs are highly adaptable to various cultures. They're easy to access for a variety of communities, and they develop clear, consistent, and supportive relationships throughout a child's extended network. That's those different spheres of a child's life, from families to schools to religious institutions, and outward to the broader network of mental health and social services supports. Also, because we want to factor in the fact that adverse childhood experiences are a predictive factor in youth for drug use, we also want our program to provide supportive education for families in general, but also targeting specifically higher risk children, such as children who are the children of incarcerated adults, for example, would be an excellent place to start with a program like ours.
So what's all the hype about our program? Let me tell you. So we plan on to develop a skilled network of trained facilitators that are supported by a mental health case manager. Also, identify community partners such as schools, churches, and other community programs. We would like to develop toolkits and trainings for parents to engage in a series of group members meetings. As we mentioned earlier, it starts from the parents, and they're influenced by their social network as well. Um, we'd like to organize engaging field trips, educational field trips, and places that promote positive social engagement because all social engagement is not recommended social engagement. We would like to develop a program that will be evaluated through ongoing assessments and participant feedback.
So, in concluding our prevention workshop, it's important to remember that the prevention of narcotics and substance use in adults, youth and emerging adults requires a holistic, integrated approach that takes into account the biological, psychological, social, and spiritual dimensions of individuals' lives. By addressing the issue through social ecology framework, we can work to change the broader environmental changes that contribute to the substance use while also providing direct support to individuals, families, and communities. We'll sustain effort at all levels, from individual education and family support to community programming and policy reform. There is potential to reduce the prevalence of narcotics use and promote healthier, more resilient youth and emerging adults.
So, some questions for you all, our listeners, to think about. If you were to implement this program in Durham, North Carolina, what do you think will work? What do you think could be adapted for the youth in this area? Please respond. And here, we'd like to go through our references. Just a quick look at our references. So, thank you for listening. Thank you for enjoying our program. Remember HYPE, helping you through prevention and education. And this here is how you can contact me and my colleagues.